Hello viewers, and welcome to yet another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today we'll be taking a look at a brand new preview article for our upcoming 5th entry within the Planetfall cycle of war packs, Wrath of the Crusaders. So, before we move into the thick of things, keep in mind that though this article does include a healthy dose of exceptionally exciting new spoilers, I'm going to try to stick to a strictly cursory overview only, and merely share my initial reaction to these cards, because since we've still yet to see even a single full release of any product within the Planetfall cycle itself, much of the true synergy and combo potential inherent to these cards remains entirely yet to be seen. So, with keeping that in mind, let's nevertheless take the plunge and together scour and explore our latest article for each and every piece of information possible. And remember that, as always, I'll be covering each and every one of these cards revealed within this very war pack in a far more thorough and much more exhaustive review at a far later date, after this war pack's official release. And of course, you can rest assured that my making a spotlight interview for this new warlord will be a definite priority. But with our introduction aside, and before we delve into our latest delectable spoilers, this article reminds us that in the Planetfall cycle, we can expect a far greater emphasis on both narrative and plot. While the Astra Militarum is struggling to hold off encroaching chaos and myriad Xenos forces, a detachment of Adeptus Astartes from the Black Templars chapter arrives at Sakhalem. Not exactly to save the day, but rather simply to extricate some artifacts more valuable to the Imperium than the entire planet itself. So, if you've already made it this far into the video, make sure to tweet me #TypicalSpaceMarine on Twitter. But in any case, these holy relics were apparently once in the possession of an FFG original character named Saint Camilla, who actually has their name included within a card later spoiled by this article. Seeing as how Sakhalem itself, the planet over which we'll be fighting, is a shrine world, it makes sense to conclude that Camilla, therefore, happens to be our associated saint. But we still have no idea as to what exactly she did that was worth such recognition by the Imperium that merit her being elevated to sainthood. But in any case, and as still additional provisional info, the Black Templars are originally a derivative of the Imperial Fists chapter of Space Marines, which were one of the original Loyalist legions created by the Emperor of Mankind. They place a great emphasis on martial combat and honor above most other things, and as a result, have a tendency to get themselves into situations they might be at times unable to handle, and occasionally this could result in the prideful acceptance of suicide missions, or simply taking on challenges that they have no means of winning. They loathe Xenos, mutants, and psychers of any and all description, and for that reason they're one of the scarcely few Space Marines chapters that excludes librarians entirely. So if you're looking to make a strictly thematic deck, you'll have to pick your ally and army unit options accordingly. Another couple unusual customs are that they incorporate their scout analog trainees or neophytes as participating members of their seasoned, veteran, and battle-hardened squadrons of both tactical and assault marines, and additionally, the Black Templars are one of few chapters of Space Marines which defy the Astartes imposed limit of having no more than 1,000 battle brothers compose the entire chapter army. But on to our actual cards, and in this article, our third Space Marines faction warlord is unveiled to be a chaplain, specifically a holy warrior clad entirely in black stylized armor, and with a helmet made to resemble a bleached white skull. They wield a staff called the Crusaders Arcanum into battle, and their power armor is reinforced by the force field generated by something called a Rosarius. In the thick of combat, they tend to focus on chanting chapter-relevant battle creeds, and in a gaming sense, this would equate to exhibiting a wide range of support-type abilities. So, in this specific case, our warlord in question is Chaplain Mavros, another Planetfall Fantasy Flight game's original character, with an attack value of 2, a rather significant pool of 7 hit points, and whom begins each game with both 7 cards and 7 resources. He has the Soldier and Black Templars traits and reads Action. Deal 1 damage to a target Space Marines faction unit you control at a technology planet, Blue. The target unit gets +1 attack value until the end of the phase, limit twice per phase. So, despite not seeing the bloody side of his card, and before bothering to read so much as any other ability or effect included within his signature squad, this already seems like a very potent ability. So long as your targeted unit is sitting at a blue planet, you can give it, if need be, up to 2 additional attack value, regardless as to your warlord's present location. Most Space Marines faction units tend to have high hit point values, and if you need to either threaten to kill an enemy unit, or otherwise ensure you can kill an enemy unit, for instance, if you're specifically expecting or anticipating shield cards, then this ability could be utterly fantastic. And remember that, as a Space Marines faction player, if you manage to get even a single point of damage through to one of your enemy units, then this ability synergizes tremendously well with effects along the lines of the unpreventable damage added by Crushing Blow. Still, it gets even better when you look at one of the effects that Space Marines have access to, which allows them to ready their units, specifically Vengeance, an event which allows you to ready a Space Marines army unit after another unit you control at that planet is destroyed by an attack. You attack with a unit, you deal it 1 damage through Mavros to increase its attack, and then, once your attack-boosted unit has attacked and become exhausted, perhaps your opponent has other targets they'd like to attack. And, though your wounded unit is likely vulnerable, since an exhausted unit is normally no longer a threat to your enemy until it readies again, it might therefore work in your opponent's favor for them to put a higher priority on killing off some of your other units. And once one of your other, likely to be less powerful units does happen to be destroyed, you can simply play out your copy of Vengeance in order to immediately ready, and then proceed to attack with your previously attack value boosted unit again, so that you can ultimately benefit from that Chaplain Mavros offensive effect more than once from the same unit, regardless of his twice per phase activation limitation. And plus, when you consider that Chaplain Mavros' ability is not a cost, that means you're entirely free to shield against that damage. And further still, you can opt to circumvent or avoid it entirely in the first place. For instance, Blood Angel's Veterans, if ready, negates that point of damage completely. And as each instance of Chaplain Mavros' ability ability is independent, your warlord and target veterans in conjunction could be used to give you 2 separate instances of that same +1 attack value bonus. And since that limit of 2 is per phase, if you happen to have a copy of the veterans out during the deploy phase, I can scarcely think of a better and more frustrating way to stall out your opponent and get them to pass early, which could position you very favorably to haul in and or deny an enormous amount of resources for the proceeding command phase. And of course, it's definitely worth noting that Chaplain Mavros can target himself with this ability, and when we explore the remaining cards in his signature squad, we quickly see that the receipt and assignment of damage feeds into a whole host of new unstoppable specialization abilities. Plus, although we've yet to see another unit's specific stats, his ability could also work enormously well to enable or otherwise increase the odds of the previously spoiled neophyte apprentice being able to successfully trigger its ability, because, as our only pre-Mavros Black Templar unit, it has the effect of, upon successfully dealing damage to an enemy, instantly upgrading itself to Veteran Brother status within its associated chapter, being represented in game terms by effectively replacing itself with your choice of 4 or lower cost Black Templar army unit fetched from within the top 6 cards of your deck. That is, of course, if the Neophyte Apprentice does happen to have more than 1 hit point. But on to that which we do know, which is that Chaplain Mavros is now one of 2 warlords whose signature squad composition happens to break our established mold. Whereas we've seen a Dark Eldar warlord with 4 events and only 2 army units, Chaplain Mavros himself deviates from our norm in having 3 common army units and 1 elite army unit. But first up, in covering his unusually diverse signature squad, we have the common army unit, the Reclusium Templars, a 3-cost army with 1 command icon, an attack value of 2, 3 total hit points, and the Soldier and Black Templars traits. They also happen to possess the Unstoppable specialization, which reads, the first time this unit is assigned damage this round, prevent one of that damage and ready this unit. So, let's note first that 3 HP means that even without the assistance of shields, this army unit is quite capable of attacking, albeit only at a blue planet, for a total of 4, so long as it can rely on the assistance of Mavros. But even better, you'll almost certainly want to attack once, pre-power-up, so that you can not just attack for that initial 2, but then prevent an incoming point of damage, ready this unit, and then attack again, whether it's ultimately for 3, or for 4, or even for more, depending on what else, if anything, you choose to combo with this unit. And even if it isn't fighting at a blue planet and receiving aid from your warlord, the simple receipt of an enemy attack or incurring damage from any source can also serve to ready this rather survivable unit. You just want to try to ensure that he is exhausted when he does end up taking damage. So, though you're limited to this specialization triggering only once per round, note, not each combat round, it nevertheless seems exceptionally potent, and though a cost of 3 is fairly steep, serving as yet another expensive addition to the typical Space Marine deck cost curve, it also happens to be another instance of a unit that's entirely drop pod assault, indomitable, and crushing blow eligible. table, and really taking even only that which we've seen thus far into consideration, it already appears that the amount of combat math manipulation that Chaplain Mavros can enable is pretty much absurd. The one command icon associated with the Reclusium Templars is noteworthy, certainly not insignificant, so, given its versatility and survivability, either by itself or combined with something along the lines of a lore-bending honored librarian, this comes off initially as a pretty fantastic unit. You could even add in Steel Legion Chimeras to make them even more frustratingly sticky and difficult to remove than they already happen to be. So, while this single command unit might not win you mini cards and resources, it still may nevertheless enable you to get the utmost and maximal value from those you've already spent. But as if our aforementioned common army units weren't already expensive enough, we next have a first for any signature squad, which is the inclusion of an elite army unit, specifically our 5-cost The Emperor's Champion, a unique army unit with 2 command icons, an attack value of 3, and a sizable 6 hit points. He has the Soldier, Black Templars, and Elite traits, as well as combat action. A target-ready enemy army unit at this planet must be declared as an attacker, and this unit declared as a defender during your opponent's next combat turn, if able. Limit once per combat round. So, this unit is effectively able to issue a challenge, something very common in tabletop 40k, and in this case, you pick an enemy army unit, and they have to attack your Emperor's Champion at the next possible opportunity. Not only is this unit likely to survive, given its formidable pool of HP, but it also spares some of your more fragile units from being picked off by the enemy. Maybe a single hit point 10th Company Scout ends up being saved, or perhaps our champion intervenes between an opponent and something that's been beaten and battered by Chaplain Mavros' ability. Or maybe it ensures that your opponent's hardest-hitting unit directs its attacks at the Emperor's Champion instead of outright bloodying or even destroying your warlord. And definitely keep in mind that whether your champion has all 6 hit points or even just a single HP remaining, it ultimately stands to absorb an entire single attack from something even so powerful as a 12 attack value Rograx Bloodhand, whatever the case may be. It's also certainly worth noting that an attack value of 3 is definitely nothing to scoff at, but it's not exactly huge, and when at a planet by itself, this expensive elite isn't really providing any benefit to you through its ability. 2 command icons also happens to be nice, but again, that's certainly not amazing, and while this unit does happen to be eligible to benefit from effects like the Elite Resurrecting Fall Back, it also remains tragically susceptible to Archon's Terror, Inquisitorial Fortress, and so many other disastrous, deleterious effects. So, if you happen to have the resources, I certainly see playing this unit, perhaps alongside something like the event-neutering Land Raider, but given just how steep Chaplain Mavros' cost curve is, whether or not you try to supplement this 1-copy unit, or perhaps simply dodge it nearly entirely, that all remains to be seen. But next up, we have a signature attachment, the Ancient Crovius Arcanum. With a cost of 1, it has 3 shield icons, possesses the war gear and weapon traits, and reads, attached to a unit you control. Attached unit gains Unstoppable. The first time this unit is assigned damage this round, prevent 1 of that damage and remove 1 damage from this unit. So, what whatever you decide to adhere this to, the attached unit immediately stands to gain a tremendous amount of survivability. It could be on any unit you like, be it common or elite, up to and including your warlord, so long as that unit is indeed eligible to receive war gear attachments, which excludes a great many vehicles. And considering still further that this is our first signature Space Marine attachment that does not count as a one copy in play at any time relic, this, combined with the likes of Iron Halo, could give Chaplain Mavros absolutely unparalleled survivability and mid-combat adaptability. If you have to offset a large incoming attack, the Iron Halo and Indomitable both work wonders, but if instead you have to dispatch myriad swarming individual units, perhaps things like Chimera or Termagant tokens, then the ancient Crozius Arcanum is perfect for not just preventing damage, but further stripping away any damage tokens you've already taken, and likely will have incurred. And of course, you can trigger Chaplain Mavros' attack boosting ability all the more indiscriminately with this attachment in play, knowing that you can either outright prevent that first instance of damage and potentially remove damage tokens you've already suffered, or if you've already happened to exhaust, play, or otherwise have used up your complete and entire range of damage prevention effects, if you've yet to play out this attachment, the versatility of 3 printed shield icons also allows it tremendous shielding flexibility, in all the while maintaining the health and well-being of the various constituent elements of your army. Still, on to Mavros' support, the zero-cost Faith and Hatred. It has the Creed trait and reaction. After a unit you control is assigned damage by an attack, exhaust this support to prevent one of that damage. And frankly, what's not to like? There's practically no question as to whether you should play this support. The moment you draw it, you might as well play it. It counts as a deployment action, and each time one of your units takes damage, albeit only from an attack, you have the option of exhausting the support and triggering that reaction to prevent one of those points of damage, albeit of course only once per round. It doesn't do much, perhaps, relative to several other powerful signature supports, but for the cost, especially compared to some of Mavros' other signature cards, I can't begin to complain. Played early, you could easily prevent 7 damage over the course of a particularly long and grueling game, and considering just how important each and every individual point of damage can be, whether it's to determine the outcome of early game battles or simply to ensure that there's the most shield card discrepancy possible between you and your opponent, this support may not seem like much at first, but could nevertheless prove to be enormously powerful over the course of an entire game. Hell, it even prevents armor bane damage, and for this or for any kind of damage prevention effect, if you've chosen to ally with the Astra Militarum, flying units like the Assault Valkyrie could not only hit extremely hard for you, but further, due to the flying keyword having any incoming non-flyer attack damage prior to your opponent to shield or prevent that damage, Faith and Hatred could make that and other similar flyers even more durable and sticky than they already are, allowing you to wring out each and every last drop of value from each and every one of your army units. And it's certainly worth noting that this works on your warlord as well. But last of our unusually diverse signature squad Squad is Vow of Honor, a 1-cost event with 1 printed shield icon. It has the power and vow traits as well as reaction. After a Space Marines faction unit you control takes damage, that unit gets +3 attack value for its next attack this phase. So, if your opponent ever manages to actually damage one of your units, or you simply choose to boost one of your own units via Chaplain Mavros, this allows you to gain an absurd amount of ephemeral attack value, an increase of 3 prior to your next attack. And considering that this effect is a fantastic enabler of Crushing Blow, depending on what exactly you end up drawing in your first several cards and opening hand, this combined with the likes of Crushing Blow might just allow you to outright bloody your opponent's warlord in the extreme early game. So there's usually not much to complain about when it comes to straightforward attack bonuses. During a game, one's units naturally take damage through attacks, and your surviving units themselves then attack in return. If you need to ensure you can score kills, or simply want to rack up as much damage as possible, this is an absolutely fantastic means of doing so. Don't need to tack on additional damage? Then by all means, discard this event for its shield value. Really, the only downside to this card is that your unit has to take damage during the same phase it intends to attack, and that the bonus only lasts for a single next attack, akin to a Catachan outpost. And if your opponent has some sort of devious surprise waiting, it's entirely possible they may stall their Archon's Terror or Tzeentch's Firestorm until after you've played 1 or more copies of this event. And of course, the very same can be said of your activating Chaplain Mavros' planet-dependent ability. Between obtaining the benefit and actually getting to attack, your units are, regrettably, left entirely vulnerable. So, certainly a lot of upside, but not without at least some vulnerability. But still, taken all together, I think Chaplain Mavros and his signature squad add a third incredibly diverse and excitingly unique new gameplay option to our established and powerful competitive Space Marines faction. If you want to play units and depend on them to stay exactly where you've put them, potentially round after round after round, then Chaplain Mavros may be exactly the warlord you've been looking for. But despite our having covered a fascinating new warlord and his unusually diverse signature squad, our article also happens to include a card fan. And while we see some repeats of past partial spoilers, we also receive the privilege of seeing nearly 2 complete cards spoiled. First off, for our partials, we appear to have a new 0-cost Tau support called the Colony Shield Generator with an interrupt effect, and we again see an upcoming affordable Eldar army unit in the 1-cost Fast and Furious Same-Han Kinsman. But next, we see a brand new 2-cost Chaos army unit named the Berserker Warriors. Apart from a loyal icon and the World Eaters trait, we unfortunately glean no additional information regarding this unit. And apart from knowing that the World Eaters are one of the first traitor Space Marine legions, and that they've an established predilection for sadism, bloodshed, and ruthlessness, what exactly this unit ends up doing, apart from our seeing 1 word of visible ability text reading destroyed, entirely remains to be seen. but we do see one entirely complete spoiler next, namely the unique 3-cost Astra Militarum support Cathedral of St. Camilla, who, remember, is the patron saint of the planet Sakhalem itself. It has the location and ecclesiarchy traits and combat action. Exhaust this support to target up to one non-elite enemy army unit at each strong point icon planet, green. Exhaust each targeted unit, limit once per phase. So, much in the same vein as Broderick War, this is another instance which serves to make the Astra Militarum faction all the more powerful at green strongpoint planets. Despite this support's upfront expense, it's nevertheless an exceptionally strong effect to be able to consistently and reliably exhaust enemies round after round, and all without having to pay some additional non-resource cost, such as exhausting a unit to fund suppressive fire, or otherwise sacrificing a unit to facilitate the ability of the unique Captain Marcus. And if it just so happens that you're anticipating fighting at multiple planets during the same game round, it's entirely possible that you might benefit from exhausting several units, which would serve to fortify your presence on multiple planets at once. The problem, of course, is that despite being outrageously expensive, this support is unique, it can only be triggered at strongpoint planets, and even if you thought to ready it through the 2 Arms event, it's limited to only being triggered one time per phase. And, thanks to the range skirmish and initiative token, even if you are able to trigger this effect, it still isn't guaranteed to make much of an impact for you. And if your opponent, knowing they're playing against AM, only manages to play their albeit likely to be scarce and often exceedingly few in number elites at strongpoint planets, and saves their commons for the others, then you're once again denied benefit from activating this support. So, due to its potential to go untriggered once played, or the chance of it simply remaining dead in your hand, I'm not exactly sure I'm sold on this one. I could see Broderick War putting so much pressure on strongpoint planets that your opponent is essentially forced to respond and contest your putting armies there. And I could also see him nastily surprising an opponent by suddenly transforming a planet entirely unexpectedly into a strongpoint location, but outside of potentially working well with that specific upcoming AM Warlord, I definitely still stand to be convinced. But the very last of our card fan and our utmost final spoiler of this video, we ultimately see the huge Chain Choppa, a 1-cost orc attachment with 1 shield icon, as well as the war gear and weapon traits. The associated text is almost entirely spoiled, to the extent which I'm comfortable assuming the card explicitly clearly reads, attached to a non-warlord unit. Attached unit gets +4 attack. Attached unit cannot ready between combat rounds during the combat phase. So clearly a staggeringly powerful effect. So long as you can hit once, you will hit like a Space Hulk. And if you don't need to ready because you obliterated whatever's opposing you, then you need not bother worrying about the downside of this non-unique, non-loyal, extremely affordable attachment. So, maybe you do something so straightforward as attaching this to a Rattling Deadeye, so that it not only wins a command struggle at a planet, but if your opponent were to attempt to send their warlord sniping after it, they'd be suddenly facing down a 5-attack army unit with ranged, regardless of initiative. Plus, there's not even a limit to the number of copies you could affix to the same unit. So, whether you simply slap the huge chain choppa on something with a large number of hit points, or perhaps something with ranged, this seems absolutely fantastic in any case. Obviously, your opponent could answer it with something along the lines of, say, Eldorath Starbane or Suppressive Fire in order to exhaust your unit, which would then proceed to stay exhausted, but you could in many cases simply plan ahead so long as you know what to expect from your enemy, and therefore attach this to something like a copy of Nozdreg's Flash Gits, which can easily opt to ready itself to attack at least once, but ideally twice, despite any inability to ready between combat rounds. Or you could attach this to something like a Cadian Mortar Squad, so that it can not only attack for 5 during the ranged skirmish round, but so that you can then use any of several Astra Militarum card effects to remove one of your units from play, resulting in your readying your Cadians only to attack again. And of course, you're entirely free to wash, rinse, and repeat. So, staggeringly powerful and in some cases borderline absurd. Definitely an incredibly powerful addition to not just orcs, but also Astra Militarum, and certainly something for Chaos to consider as well. Under normal circumstances, they aren't exactly hurting for attack value, but having more options at one's disposal is seldom an unwelcome thing. But with the last of our spoilers now covered, that brings us to an end of this article, the first preview of the 5th and penultimate installment of the Planetfall cycle of war packs. So, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to share in the comments what your own thoughts, opinion, assessment, and analysis of our new warlord and all of these freshly spoiled new cards are. How does Chaplain Mavros compare to our 2 already established Space Marines warlords? Will his incredible staying presence allow him to perhaps outlast the formidable economy of Captain Cato Sicarius, or perhaps be more consistent than the extremely mobile, damage-bursting Ragnar Blackmane? Be sure to comment with your thoughts. But with that said, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. Or, if you are already subscribed, I ask that you share this video, because each new person that stumbles upon something relevant to Conquest means we've reached one new possible player that could someday bolster the ranks of our still growing, expanding community. And of course, the more players there are, the larger our community becomes, and ever greater the message grows that we together send to Fantasy Flight Games, saying they should continue to support and release expansions for this remarkable product. But with that out of the way, you've undoubtedly noticed a dramatic change in audio quality for this video, which has been the result of my purchasing my first new microphone in a whopping 10 years. And if at any point you ever feel like supporting me directly in a financial sense, and feel like tossing me perhaps a few dollars as a way of saying thanks, and to help further increase the audio and visual quality of the Hive Tyrant content, I would strongly encourage you visit my brand new site, patreon.com/thehivetyrant, because without the support of viewers like you, be it fiscal, be it emotional, or in any other sense, the content I create for this channel would quite simply not be possible, and in all honesty cease to exist. But in any case, thank you once again for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.